but he makes a very good point. He said, everybody is on the lookout for propaganda, our propaganda, their propaganda. He said, waves of refugees don't have time to stop and say, let's get our stories together. So you can be sure that the stories that we heard coming out, every group of refugees told the same story about the AVO, about what Hungary was like before October 23rd. And you've got to believe them. There is no way they could be coordinating any phony stories.
Sure.
Everything they told us is real because the same stories kept coming out of the same thing. And that really, really impressed me. We were working within sight. We couldn't see it because it was dark, but the bridge at Andau was just a little bit over as we faced into Hungary to our left. And
when did you arrive to the border?
Christmas.
Okay, you
Christmas.
can help
Christmas
yourself out of
night.
this tiny little thing.
Sure.
Christmas night,
Christmas night.
1956.
Okay, so it was like you were part of an Air Force, U.S. Air Force mission.
No.
No?
The Air Force. Good point. The Air Force invited us to fly to Frankfurt and Munich,
Okay.
ostensibly to cover Operation Safe Haven, which was the bringing of the refugees who were coming to America.
Let's show it.
But the American military, in a very, very rare burst of enlightenment, when we got to Munich, they said, fellas, we're going to turn our backs. We suspect you want to go that way, meaning to the Austro-Hungarian border, because this other was just a PR for the Air Force, the public relations, we're bringing the Hungarians to a land of freedom, which was nice, but they were still coming out. 200,000 came out.
That's right.
Eventually, and they were still coming out. We must have had 200 come out the night we were there, Christmas night. So the Air Force got us over there to Munich.
Okay.
And they were supposed to hang on to us and remind us that we were there to cover the Air Force transport from Munich to America. But that's what I keep pointing out. This revolution was so powerful that they turned their backs and said, we know you want to go that way, so we're going to close our eyes. Come back when you feel like it.
Okay,
And
so
we
you
did.
were free to travel
Yes.
to the
Yeah.
Austrian-Hungarian border from
Yes.
Munich.
Right,
And you managed to somehow to get there,
right.
maybe with some other journalists as
I
well?
was with one photographer.
Okay. Your colleague?
I never. We
Not
met.
beyond.
We met on the plane
Okay.
flying over
Okay.
from McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey over to Frankfurt and then Munich.
Okay.
And from there, we were on our own. So we took a train to Eisenstadt, I think, in Austria, Vorswald. And then I think we went the last few miles by bus into Andau. And this was so funny. I expected Andau to be a beehive of activity.
Right. There was nothing.
Very quiet night. The night we got there late at night, Christmas night, very quiet.
Was it Christmas Eve?
Christmas night.
Christmas night, so 25th.
Corazon Estacad. Yeah.
Okay.
So I went up to a policeman and I said, Ungarische Flüchtlinge. And he said, Peek's Gästehaus. So we went to Peek's Gästehaus, and I was alone now. The photographer was out doing things he wanted to do. So I asked a barmaid. There was no lobby like we know in a major hotel. So I asked a barmaid, Ungarische Flüchtlinge. She said, Nummer 19. So I went to the room number 19, knocked on the door, and a voice in a Norwegian accent. Yeah, hello? And I said, look, I'm an American journalist, and I'm told that you are... And he started cussing already. He said, you American bastards, we're never going to have another American with us on the border. They told them not to take pictures. They popped off a flash bulb. We had to scatter. They could have ruined the whole operation. And then he opened the door while he was still cussing. And I could see a Norwegian flag behind it on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to school in Norway.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the Norwegian Merchant Marine.
Mm-hmm.
So I speak that pretty well. So I said to him, Snakker du norsk? Bessel Norvego? And he stopped. He said, see if those boots fit you on the other side. You're going with us. So he knew if I spoke Norwegian, I had to be okay. So we went out. He was later captured. We had 2 men captured, not that night.
By whom?
By the Russians.
By the Russians.
Yeah, and they were threatened with execution, but the Norwegian government got them both. One was Norwegian, one was American. The Americans did nothing. The Norwegians got them out in 51 days.
Mm-hmm.
And
so they spent 51 days in Hungarian
in
custody?
Hungarian jail, yeah.
Okay.
And it was not pleasant. It was not pleasant at all.
I can imagine.
But what we had was one little rubber raft, a gummichomog, and we had so what got Thorvald Stoltenberg and me together on Norwegian television. I'd known Thorvald since 1953. We met at an international student conference, and we'd seen each other in Norway a couple times. So when we finally got out to the border, I saw he was in charge. I didn't even know he was there. Wonderful. So he was running the whole operation.
And did you did you have any idea why he was there and how he got there?
There's an international student. There were a lot of different groups on the border,
Okay.
including former German SS troops.
Oh my God.
We had about 8 different groups working side by side on the border. And the SS that was a joke. There was no strong Nazi presence, but they thought they owned anti-communism, and they were, as a matter of fact, kind of ridiculous. They had all kinds of great night vision equipment that we had never heard of.
Really?
As early as 1956, you could look through those things, and you could see. Well, Thorvald did the bravest thing I've ever seen in my life. And I read his autobiography, and he left it out. He mentioned the night on the border, but never mentioned what he did. And I called him out on it. I said, Thorvald, what in that? He said, well, Norwegian politicians aren't like American politicians. They don't make big things of this, which was
Very strange.
a good lesson. But here's what he did. Everybody knew. See, the Hungarians had a network of visitors. The only light allowed on the border, from our point of view, was just for the visitors to see if they got the right money before they gave the Hungarians over to us. And we had a boat and two boatmen with paddles. So the theory was when the refugees came to the far bank, both of our men would go over. One with an oar would stay on the Hungarian side of the canal.
Mm-hmm.
And the other would come back.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody knew, all the visitors knew, when it got to be daylight, it was over.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this was like a movie. We saw a light way, way, way in the woods. It either had to be the AVO or those units of the Hungarian army that had not totally defected to the freedom side. And we packed up and went all the way back up the ridge, and that was all definitely Austria. Hungary owned both banks of the canal, obviously, because you can't run a canal with owning just one bank.
Right.
So we were all packed up and ready to go. And then one of the Irish boys, there were 11 nationalities working the border with our little group, 11 nationalities. So one of the Irish boys came running up from the canal and said, "There's another group of refugees." Oh my God, with daylight and a light coming out of the woods very far away, but still. So we ran back to the Land Rover, cut the rubber raft ran back down. But in our haste, we made a terrible mistake. Each man with an oar thought the other one was in the boat. So when they yelled, "Pull," and we pulled, we had a boat full of refugees, horses coming out of the woods. So I was number 2 man on the rope. Torvald was number 1. Without an instant's hesitation, he belly flopped into the empty raft, and tried to paddle his way across with his hands. It was futile. The current took him downstream. But then we saw a stick. We'd been there all night. Nobody had ever noticed that stick.
Okay.
And some of the more religious people thought God put the stick down for our convenience. So Torvald grabbed the stick and was able to get across the canal. And then we had the boat and our men with the oars on the same side, and we quickly got 40 across. 40 refugees, 5 at a time, and got back into Austria before the light got much closer.
Do you remember them, if they were like families, children, or
mostly families? Mostly families. But I will never know for the rest of my life if I would have jumped into that boat or not. I like to think I would have, but I know that Torvald did. So I got on him. I said, "Torvald, so I went around him. I said, I'm going to write this for the Norwegian people." So I wrote an article, and the Norwegian television people got a hold of it, and they decided to bring us both together. But
when was that? When you met at the television?
I think that was 2008.
2008?
No, 2007.
2007, okay.
2006 or 2007.
Right. And are you still in touch with him?
No.
No.
But I feel like I'm in touch with him through his book. He's old now, and his son is head of NATO. And his son, Torvald, the old man, never made prime minister. He was mayor of Oslo. You know how European politics are. He was mayor of Oslo, defense minister of Norway, and foreign minister.
Yeah, right.
His son made prime minister and is now Secretary General of NATO.
Right.
So,
Great. So, was it this location where it all happened? Was it close to the bridge of Andau? Was it
fairly
right there?
close.
And it was destroyed by the time.
Yeah,
So there was no bridge practically.
no bridge, no.
And did you have any idea what happened after this night, after Christmas night? Were there other
Yes.
refugees as
yes,
well?
Yes. We knew exactly what happened. After, communism was very smart. They didn't want one single Hungarian, Bulgarian, Romanian, didn't want one to escape to the West to talk about the reality.
Mm-hmm.
Not one. But after the first day of the revolution, there were hundreds of Hungarians who got away. So the communists very skillfully changed their plans. They said, now that part is blown. We've lost the propaganda war for the time being.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll now just we'll leave the border open.
Mm-hmm.
It stayed open until January the 12th.
Mm-hmm.
So from October the 23rd until January the 12th,
Mm-hmm.
it was fairly easy to leave.
Okay.
They also planted people
Mm-hmm.
whose job it was to wait a month in free countries and then say, let us the hell out of here, we want to go back. All kinds of complaints. Nincho Sinhas. That was the complaint. There's no Sinhas. I said to my brother, you're right, no Avo, no Sinhas. Sorry. So they planned it that way. And on January, we knew one day, they knew where we were.
Mm-hmm.
We knew that one day, as a matter of fact, I'm glad I didn't know this at the time, there had been Russian troops on horseback on our side of the canal.
Mm-hmm.
But not the night we were there, so we were able to work. They let us work. They wanted these refugees out.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of infrastructure destroyed. It would take pressure off the Hungarian communist state. They wanted them out, and then one day they were back to October 22nd.
Mm-hmm.
That was January the 12th.
Right.
So they arrested my Norwegian friend, the one who said, you're coming with us.
Mm-hmm.
Einar Roos, R-O-O-S. And he and our American, who I never met until after he was released, and then we spent an evening together, Richard Roraback. But I tell you, I don't know of a cause like this. I think I told you there were no journalists. They may have been journalists when they came, but everybody became part of the operation. They're lifting babies out of a rubber boat, carrying them up the ridge to Austria.
Mm-hmm. What happened to you after this evening? Did you travel back to Munich and
No, I went up to Oslo,
Mm-hmm.
where I had been to school. Since I was in Europe, I took advantage of it, and then I went back to another sector of the border where they were coming across over land. But there they didn't need us. All we had to do was say welcome. There were so many stories. There was a story of a gypsy. I think this was the first time in history that gypsies have ever moved for political reasons. Mm-hmm. Since the dawn of history, the first time gypsies ever moved because of political reasons was during the Hungarian Revolution. And there were stories, for instance, of a group that got lost. Well, there are many terrible stories of people who crossed on land.
Mm-hmm.
And whoever designed that border was on psychedelic drugs. It went like this. Many times, groups got out of Hungary
and returned back
and kept walking straight and wound up back in Hungary and were captured. You probably know the Russians made an artificial border and dressed like Red Cross people and yelled, "Ito Sabachak, Ito Sabachak," and then they arrested them when they got close. There was a gypsy who they were clearly lost. They got separated. Gypsy pulled out his violin, started playing. Everybody came to the music. The whole group got reunited again, and it was just so.
Did you have a
touching.
chance to write the story immediately after it
Oh
happened?
yeah, many.
So you
many.
could send it back to your newspaper and it was published.
Yes. Oh yeah.
That was the way that the American public could learn about this thing.
Well, I only wrote for a very small part of the American. Our radio show now is nationwide, but in those days, all we had was one very small little newspaper. But there were a lot of people writing, and the word got out. America was really, really galvanized. I think America didn't help. And there was a terrible rumor going around here at the time that Eisenhower had said to Khrushchev, "Do what you have to do quickly because we can't control our people much longer." There were American soldiers going AWOL, meaning bye-bye, and going into Hungary in uniform and tying up with freedom fighters.
So you become friends after you met at the border?
Oh
Immediately
yeah,
you
oh
become friends.
yeah.
Okay.
We became good friends, but I really miss him a lot. If he were in Budapest, he would steal the show.
Could you have any idea about the people that just came across the border, Hungarians? What happened to them later?
Oh, sure. Ours is a pretty good little microcosm. The ones who came to New York, Cleveland, Detroit, big centers of Hungarian, they just got absorbed. There are a lot of them that cousins in McKeesport, Pennsylvania. There was no problem. Now there were no Hungarians in Greensboro, North Carolina. We had a family, and there was a man who gave them a house, beautiful house, title and all, just gave them a house, Stonkai. I'm trying to think of their names. Two beautiful little girls, Zhuzi and Eva. And they led a very good life in North Carolina, where the children learned English before the parents did. Some single men came, and we got them jobs, and they eventually went to centers where there were more Hungarians. We had only one who made a fuss, appeared on television saying, "I want to go back to Hungary." And we knew it was a setup. I'm sure there were some who honestly wanted to go back. But there was think about it. 200,000 come out, and they get noticed by the world. Their story gets noticed. 3 months later, one family wants to go home. They get almost as much publicity. So the communists knew they would lose this round, but if they waited 3 months, and a couple of them were dissatisfied with the West, disappointed with the West, and wanted to go home, then they would get their propaganda.
Were they agents of the communists? These people
Not necessarily, but instructed
by some way, blackmailing or whatever.
Exactly. Okay. I think some had to be honest, but it was a ploy. Because don't forget, Moscow had a lot at stake here.
Sure.
There was a lot going on that you never heard about. In Romania and Czechoslovakia, people were very excited. The communists knew they were not popular. And they knew it boiled over in Hungary, and they didn't want 35,000 people dead like you had in Hungary.
Sure.
So they didn't want a revolution like that there, but they were damn glad you showed them how. They were very proud of the Hungarians and what you had done. And as I say, if it hadn't been for the Hungarian Revolution, the face of Europe would be completely, I don't think communism, what did communism gain after that? A straight downhill decline.
Right. Mr. Farber, thank you very much for the talk.